Okay. So we'll get going. We may be joined by the dean of the grad school um, momentarily. So if she jumps in, we'll give her the floor. I think she just wanted to welcome you all to give you guys a sense and why we were waiting a little bit. So we have about 20 new MPA students, give or take, starting from the spring until through the fall, and about 10 new MPP students starting with the spring and fall. So, typically we would get all of those students together to welcome you all to the Carsey School. So, before we get going, what I thought would be helpful is just to do quick introductions. Tell us about yourself, what program you're in. We'll introduce ourselves quickly, and then we'll move to a bit more of the formal programming. I think all of you have been on one of the orientation sessions where we kind of did the nuts and bolts. So now we're going to kind of get more into the substance of the program, of the programs, I should say. So a little bit about research, a little bit about your capstone experience, a little bit about the writing process and the writing resources at UNH. So the Writing Center will kind of share with you. So just briefly, I think I've met everyone. My name is Dan Bromberg. I'm the Director of Academic Programs at the Carsey School. I'm also an associate professor in both political science and in the Carsey School. I teach our Foundations of Public Administration class, so I'll see some of you in that. And I pick up a handful of other classes mostly in the MPA program. I'm an advisor for a handful of you. So you'll be seeing a good amount of me throughout your time at Carsey. So welcome, and let me just go to my right, which is Michael. You're on my right.
In what sense am I to your right, Dan?
Well, let's not go there.
So first of all, just a little product placement. My son gave me this Yeti mug for my birthday. This is the first time I've used it. I put hot tea in it an hour ago. It's still too hot to drink. It's sort of annoying. Anyway, so it's an excellent product if you want your beverages to stay hot. So welcome to the Carsey School of Public Policy. It's a really interesting time to be furthering your education in public policy or public administration. We're certainly seeing the importance of getting policy and governance right, and the harm of not doing it, and the need for competence in knowing what you're doing. So I think it's in that sense, a very timely time to be having this conversation and to be starting the programs you're starting. I just say a couple words about the two programs. Definitely part of the philosophy of the Carsey School is to help is that our students who are just entering the field really are prepared to hit the ground running with very practical skills and knowledge. And for the students who are already in the field and trying to up their game, to really do that in a very practical way, to really give skills and knowledge that are really going to help you in your careers. And that's not to say we don't teach some theory in the program. Theory has a value in terms of being able to adapt that skill and knowledge to new situations. And so there is part of that. But really, we want people to be really ready and really to have in a very concrete ways have upped their game after they've completed these programs. And that can mean different things for the two different programs, but it certainly means having skills that go beyond research and analysis, whether that means communication skills, political skills, negotiation skills, management skills, or really any of the kinds of skills that are useful in the field of public policy or public administration. So I see Dean Moorhead has joined us. So I think, Dan, I kick it to her. Is that what I do?
That'd be great.
Okay. Take it away, Dean Moorhead.
Good morning, everybody. It's so good to see you all, even though it's virtual. And I really appreciate this opportunity to meet with my good colleagues at the Carsey School. I'm sorry, my headset was on a funky setting. There, that's better. Okay, so let me take this moment to welcome you back. I'm sure several of you are already UNH alum. So just to let you know that we do have at the graduate school approximately 2,400 students from 50 countries in 180 programs. And so the program that you're in is housed within the Carsey School of Public Policy. And you can also think of yourself as a graduate student at the University of New Hampshire, which is part of this much larger group than of students. And beyond that, we have over 100,000 alumni. So while some of you may already be a UNH alum, you will then proceed to become an alum or a double alum with a much larger group of over 100,000. So just to put that in perspective, we'd like to think of ourselves in a sense as the small part of the family that you're in there, and then this much bigger group as well. I'm echoing a lot of what Michael said. I guess the thing that's striking me at the moment is it's a really bittersweet time for us in a sense. We just had a lovely celebration over the weekend. We had a lovely celebration on Monday night with our students at the Manchester campus. And those of us who go into higher education do it for the love of learning and to see the next generation grow and move beyond anything we thought was possible. And so it's wonderful for us to get to welcome you and to celebrate your achievements on the other side of this. And I'm just struck in this moment that it's a real challenge for us to, I'll speak for myself, but I know my colleagues, many of my colleagues share this, to not be able to have these really transitional moments with you in person. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. I want to say that I've been really proud of the University of New Hampshire. I've been here 33 years. And over this summer, I know how hard people have been working day and night to try to ensure that we're going to be a safe campus for everybody. I know many of you won't need to be coming to campus. You're going to be able to take a lot of your work remotely. And so perhaps all of that particular type of effort might not be as obvious to you moving forward. But if you do want to come to campus, just remember you do have to get a test and to make sure you wear your mask so that we can all keep each other safe. That's going to be key for everybody. And it is a very earnest effort. Yes, I know mine's around here somewhere too. So I want to say as well, we're in the convention moment, or technically, I guess we're in convention theater this week because the convention work got done early. That's not a political statement. It's my understanding of the facts. But to say that there's a really important moment here that we have to see our leaders moving forward that have education and a background in the theory and in practice. And so I really commend you at taking this step into furthering your education and your careers at this really interesting time. I think local efforts, local control, local leadership, and our public administration students certainly will be right there on the ground in the thick of it, as they often are. I have known our alums now for years are in key positions, chiefs of police and town management all over the state of New Hampshire and beyond. You will be on the ground making a difference in people's lives every day. People who are in the public policy realm will be making policy which will make a difference in people's lives every day. So this will be a sacred duty that you will carry moving forward. And I'm sure some of you have been engaging in that kind of work for a long time, but you're going to be more cognizant now of the theory that undergirds the practice that you're engaging in, and that will make you better at doing that work, and hopefully then will make you better able to engage in work that will change people's lives for the better, with a better understanding of how and why you're doing what you're doing. It really is being laid bare in this moment, the importance of that. It really is. And not just here. I'm Irish. I'm seeing that in Ireland. I follow a lot of British press and Irish press and European work as well. So those kinds of work, it's really critical worldwide. And so again, I just want to commend you on getting this far. Getting into master's degrees is not a given. You have to earn that place. Our faculty do diligent work to ensure that we only admit students who are capable and competent to complete their program. And in this case, they've already made that judgment. So I think you can rest assured that you are perfectly capable and competent of getting through this program, the program that you're in. And so at this point, the question is, can you do the work that needs to be done? And so we've had an extremely high graduation rate from these programs. We know that you're able to do it. So that it's tenacity now at this point that you need, tenacity to get the work done every day, every night, get to class, be prepared, get your work done, and keep one foot in front of the other. There's a lot going on right now, but I would strongly recommend that you get to know your colleagues here, your fellow students, and have a good team effort to leave no one behind and make sure you're all pulling through this together, because that really will help immensely. As a UNH alum myself, I can tell you, I just had my study buddy come by. We haven't seen each other in years. We keep in touch on text, but he showed up the other day, and it's like we just saw each other last week. It's just an awesome experience. So congrats, good luck, and the grad school's here for you, but you've got such capable hands here with the crew that's working with you that I'm sure that you will be incredibly successful moving through the program. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dean Moorhead. So one of Dean Moorhead's typical speeches is you actually don't want to see me throughout the program, because what that means is you're visiting with the dean of the grad school. Things probably aren't the greatest thing in the world. What I would say is you should actually make an effort to try to see Dean Moorhead more. She is, a big supporter, a big advocate of our programs, and always there to support students regardless of, how busy she is and, the various roles that she has to play throughout the university. So I would encourage you to reach out. And we'll flood that email inbox, because Lord knows she doesn't have enough to do right now. But honestly, just someone great to chat with, and has such a historical perspective and vision of where this university was and where it should be. So Carrie, thank you so much for joining us. I know you're super busy throughout the day. So take care. Thanks for stopping by.
Thanks all. Congrats, and follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn. Please do feel free. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. Michael, could you just say a couple words just about yourself? I mean, you're the director of the Carsey School. Just like kind of introduction, about yourself, and then Jess will jump over to you, and then Robin and Sanjeev, and then, hopefully we will now shift to the students right after that.
Sure. So my background is I came to Carsey 5, 6, I don't know, some number of years ago to be the founding director of the Carsey School of Public Policy. I'd been in DC for most of my career, mainly working at think tanks, mainly sort of progressive think tanks, although my last job was at the Pew Charitable Trust, which is sort of very, a centrist kind of place. Working on economic policy. So I was the vice president for economic policy at the Center for American Progress. I was at the Economic Policy Institute. I was at the Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy. I sort of started off in tax policy, but my training is as a lawyer, but sort of all the fights were about economics. So I kind of ended up moving more into economic policy realm. And then I actually did take a sort of partial break from the Carsey School in 2016 from August till Election Day that year. I was the director of economic policy planning for the Clinton-Kaine transition, because transitions actually start before the election. But that ended on Election Day. So I think, that's basically my background. I also think I was going to kick off the research discussion with a little bit, some perspectives on that.
I think we'll shift to that quickly after the introductions.
Okay. Oh, great. Yeah. Gotcha.
Okay.
Anyway, so that's me. I teach basically one class in the spring in the MPP program. And I take folks to DC too during J term. If we can pull that off this year, we'll see. Fingers crossed.
Great. Thank you, Michael. Jess, why don't we flip to you just for introductions, then we'll get to the research conversation after.
Sure. I am Jess Carson. I'm a research assistant professor at the Carsey School, which means that I'm faculty, but my main duties are focused on research, and I'm actually teaching for the first time this fall. I'm teaching the quantitative methods class. So my research background, I'm a sociologist by training, but my work at Carsey over the last 10 years has really focused on the sort of vulnerable family side of things. I look a lot at the way that families and workers, socioeconomic characteristics kind of intersect with the characteristics of the places that they live, and how those sorts of features coalesce to shift their capacity to make ends meet through work. So I do a lot of recent research on childcare and on access to high quality food, and have a running and long-term interest in poverty in rural places.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. Sanjeev.
Hello, all. My name is Sanjeev Sharma. I've communicated with most, if not all of you. I do admissions and advising, and I co-teach a series of 4 project-related courses in the community development program. And then in the MPP and MPA, I am here to provide administrative academic support for any questions you may have, apart from your questions that you wouldn't have a conversation with your academic advisor. But then as I said in the previous sessions, that anything, please keep me updated, because I provide that kind of support, and I keep I'm sort of the keeper of records, so I need to know what's going on. So that's the kind of support I provide in the APP and the APA program. The MCD program, I do a little more. Like I said, I teach, co-teach a series of 4 project courses. Yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Thank you, Sanjeev. And Sanjeev really does kind of, holds that MCD program together. Him and Robin really do a big lift with that program. Like Sanjeev said, teaches multiple classes in that program. And what I would say, as far as the other 2 programs, MPA and MPP, he's always there to support and advising as well. So Sanjeev is the one we talked about those Excel sheets in our previous conversation. Sanjeev's putting those together. So, Carolyn and I are the primary advisors. But if you can't get to one of us and you do have an immediate question, Sanjeev is certainly someone you could turn to for, academic advice related to the programs as well. And Robin.
Morning, everyone. How are you? I'd like to offer you a warm welcome. I am part of the CARSI academic team, and I am happy to be your first person you reach out with a question. If I don't know the answer, I will point you in the right direction. So I also maintain the CARSI MPA and the CARSI MPP sites, and I send out announcements and communications, and I post whatever is important. I also, take all of the student digests it's a student newsletter that Jordan Hensley sends out with information that's pertinent to you, and I log that in that site. I post jobs. So again, I'm sort of the general question person, and I'm here to support you. I'm also a graduate of the other master's program in community development from 2012. So I'm a graduate of the CARSI school and also part of the academic team now.
And awesome. Welcome. Thank you, Robin. And same with Robin, right? Both Robin and Sanjeev really are the glue that allow these programs to function the way that they function. Robin supports any events that we do as well. So all of your capstone presentations, MPA, we do formal presentations. Robin's there to help support that, and really just pull everything together for us to allow these programs to function, in a seamless way. All right, let me flip down to the students that are joining us. So Greg, why don't we start with you?
Hi, everyone. Greg Lang, joining the MPA program starting this fall. Outside of that, I work at the Dairyfield School in Manchester in our Office of Philanthropy and Engagement. And to echo Dean Moorhead, working at a school, normally during the summer, it's fairly quiet, and this summer has been anything but that. And we're heading into a pretty insane fall. We've had our opening faculty meetings this week, and it's been a lot of information, a lot of new procedures and everything. So, but looking forward to starting the program.
Cool. Well, welcome, Greg. It's been a long time coming. I think we met probably 3 or 4 years ago, maybe.
Yeah, I think it was like 2016. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So we're glad that you're able to join us. Ellie.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ellie Mason. I'm from Vermont originally, but living in Portsmouth, and I worked for a lawyer for 2 years and really loved the criminal defense side of that. But I felt like I wanted to do more work at the beginning before these individuals ended up in our office. So my interests are in the criminal justice system and restorative justice and reforming communities. So I'm also really, really excited about starting the program, especially right now. I think it's like the absolute perfect time to be looking at what's going on in our country and our world, and really taking a critical eye to that and talking about it.
Awesome. Thank you, Ellie. We're thrilled to have you with us. Christina.
Hi, everyone. My name's Christina Dubin. I live in Portsmouth with my husband and 2 kids. I was formerly in education and took off some time to be home with my kids and be an artist selling my stuff here and there. And I've become increasingly involved in local legislation through environmental nonprofits. I'm on the executive committee of the New Hampshire chapter of the Surfrider Foundation. And so I'm looking forward to, getting through this, or like not just getting through this program, but I'm excited to all that it brings, and looking forward to that, being able to just dive right in once I graduate.
Awesome. Thank you, Christina. And Christina and Ellie are kind of showing this bridge that we're able to make in the MPP, right, between these field-specific interests. So criminal justice, restorative justice, environmental policy, and really bringing that together through a policy lens. So it's a cool opportunity. We look forward to working with you both and sorting that out. Aislinn.
Hi, everybody. My name is Aislinn. I'm currently in Maine, but where I'm from, but I live in the Auburn, Manchester area. I just finished up serving a year with City Year, New Hampshire. So I was serving in an elementary school in Manchester. And I am also an alumni of a couple of different TRIO programs. I'm in the MPA program, and I'm looking to focus on education and education administration. But I really appreciated those education nonprofits I've had experience with. So my goal is to sort of slide into working with those long term. Yeah, nice to meet everybody.
Awesome. Thank you, Aislinn. And Monica. You're muted.
There we go. Sorry. One last family vacation before the school year started. So we're up in Maine right now. So it's a little glitchy. I started back in the fall. I didn't go to the orientation then, so I'm catching it now. I have a social work background, and I wanted to do a little bit more into administration. My social work background is specifically motorcycles driving by. My social work background is specifically in early intervention. I really do like focusing on the younger children, the preschool-age children with learning disabilities or IEPs. I just feel like it helps them get a kickstart on their education and their future at that point. I'm hoping with this program, I can definitely take those and help with the policies that give chances to the kids who need a little bit of an extra help in the school systems where needed.
Cool. Thank you, Monica. So Monica joined us, took a couple classes in the fall and spring, and is jumping in now to orientation. So she has a bit of a perspective of the MPA if anyone wanted to reach out. What I'm hoping to do now is shift over to Michael and to Jess. And what Michael and Jess are going to do, they're going to talk a bit about policy research and policy writing, which is quite different than what I typically do, which is much more academic writing. And I think what you'll find is that your classes have a bit of a balance of both. So being able to pivot from one to the other is really important, but also extremely challenging. Extremely challenging, even from my perspective, it's very hard to write an academic piece and then switch to a policy piece. And we're going to hopefully, have
Uh-oh. Dan froze.
We lost you, Dan.
Dover's out.
No, Dover's not out. I'm still on.
You're in Dover? Okay.
Uh,
Guess it's just Dan's house is out. I'm going to text him just so he knows he's out. Maybe he can go to audio only. Oh,
Am I back?
you're back.
All right. I heard you all, but I don't know where you lost me. I'll shift to Michael now. Michael will jump in around policy research and kind of the importance of policy writing and policy research.
So yeah, I actually wasn't planning to talk about writing, but since Dan teed me up and it's an obsession, I will. I would say when we were creating the MPP program, like, I'd worked in public policy a long time and I had views of my own on what was important in an MPP program and how ours might be a little different. And one of the, I'm one perspective. So I went around and talked to lots of people I knew in public policy and just asked, so like, what do you want? What do you want from our graduates out of MPA or MPP programs? And I think every single person I talked to said, just send us people who can write. And, it's a skill. It can be improved on. We can all get better. It's hard, but I will say, to Dan's point about academic writing versus non-academic writing, it's sort of more journal. It's like, think of it as kind of, here's part of what I see when I look at people's papers and I'm like, this is wrong. A lot of it is academic writing sort of lays out all the evidence and draws a conclusion at the end. Whereas journalistic writing or advocacy writing or policy writing, you generally want to start with your conclusion and then prove it. Like, in the simplest terms, that's to me what the difference is. Like, you read a newspaper article, there are exceptions, but for the most part, the lead is like the main point of the story. And I, having written in non-academic style for so long, like, I didn't appreciate before I started doing this how hard it is for people to make that transition. But it definitely can be hard. So, but that is definitely something to focus on. It is a different style of writing. It's a style of writing much more aimed at busy people who just want you to get to the point quickly. They don't need to know every single nuance. They want to know why they're reading it from the start, and they want to know, and then they want to know why what you started with is true. So, anyway, just as that's a gross generalizations, but that's kind of what I see as the difference. In terms of research, the main thing I just wanted to touch on, before we got to Jess, who's, a much more serious researcher than me, and knows more, much more about methodologies and all of that. I want to point out that in this field, people do research for different purposes. There are distinctions between why you're doing a certain different kinds of research. And, it's all, I think, for reasons I'll get to, it's important to know what your objective is with the research you're doing. Some research is, basically just trying to see whether there's a problem, to elevate a problem. It's sort of broad, it's investigative, it's to provide just an understanding of an area. Like, we at the Carsey School just published this piece on the employment impact of the current recession by race and gender. And, there aren't any policy recommendations in it. It's not evaluating what a policy impact would be. It's just like, is this a phenomena that's happening in society that we might want to know about and we might want to address and might affect policy? Is it a situation we might want to get more attention to because it's happening and it is something that we want to consider? That's that kind of research. It's not academic research in the sense of sort of new methods or sort of really digging into every nuance. It's just sort of looking at something that might be a problem and seeing if it is a problem and elevating it. So that's one kind of research. Another is much more aimed at looking for solutions. An example of this is Professor Carson in March did a report with us comparing sort of the impact of different programs, existing programs on young parents with children, anti-poverty, basically poverty programs. And so that's much more about, okay, these are programs, how well do they work relative to each other to inform, like, if you care about that population, what programs do you want to emphasize? If you're sort of working on enrollment, what programs do you want to like push and, if you have limited resources and you got to decide how you're going to use them, what is the most effective way to do that? Another example of something we published was we did something showing that certain changes to the federal government's program trying to help small businesses, what the impact of those changes would be in terms of getting more help to smaller small businesses and minority-owned and women-owned small businesses, which was a criticism, and we had some ideas, and it wasn't just ideas; it was research-based, it was evidence-based. We felt good about that one because actually that work played a big role. It wasn't just us, but played a big role in the Treasury Department shifting how they spent $10 billion. So that's like, that was good. So there's that kind of research that's much more connected to policy in that way. And then there's just straight advocacy research. And I'll get to in a minute that the lines sometimes blur between these, but I'll give you an example of what I think of as just straight advocacy research, which is, it happens to be true right now that more Americans have died in President Trump's first term than any president's first term in history. Okay? Now that's the kind of thing you could see being effective in political advocacy. Also, just if you're critical of President Trump's COVID policies, you could use it in that. It's like a fun fact to know and tell, which could be impactful. The reason it's straight advocacy research is that you could probably say the same thing about almost every president, and it's not driven by COVID or whatever. It's driven by population has grown in the country under every president. So like every president, more people die under their presidency than the prior presidents. So that's like, just the only reason you do that is to sort of score points on a policy debate or a political debate. Now, as I said, the lines blur. Like there's policy research that shows programs work, programs don't work, that end up being good advocacy research because you use the evidence that the policy really does work to advocate for it. It's not just to inform decisions, it's to help advocating for things, right? Or, sometimes you do this sort of more, groundwork kind of research on just to understand a problem, and the research really strongly suggests a particular policy response. So, the lines do blur. I do think, though, that it's important to keep in mind what the goals are of research, and also, honestly, when you have the results, like what category it falls into. You don't want to mistake advocacy research for research that should really actually inform policy if it's kind of a out of context fact, like the one I used as an example. And I, in my years in Washington, I would see people do that, right? They're in a fight, they're using evidence, they're using research, to make their points, just facts that are like useful in a debate. But then they actually start to kind of believe that those are the most important facts for making policy decisions. And it's important to keep those things distinctive because you can end up making wrong decisions if you don't. So that's what I had to say about research. I think I will now kick it off to Professor Jessica Carson, who in my research is an estimable member of our faculty.
Thank you, Michael. That's a lovely thing to say. So I'll keep it pretty
That
brief.
wasn't advocacy research. That was like the empirically good research.
Thank you. Yeah, I am not an advocacy research. I sort of shy away from that kind of lens in my own work. And I think Michael's kind of schema that he just laid out for us fits really well with how I think about research too, and is reflective of kind of my own experience being in the field for 10 plus years. So I thought I would just give you guys like a very brief overview of some of the more practical strategies. Like, for example, how do we kind of keep a pulse on the issues that we might want to investigate? And then second, how do we actually go about doing that? Like, what are some resources for supporting those investigations? And so in terms of sort of identifying what issues might be most important to investigate, well, it depends really on the kinds of questions that you're asking. So if you're looking to think about, the possibilities linked with a specific policy proposal to influence one population over another, or to ameliorate some condition like poverty or, lack of access to early intervention, something like that, then it's especially important to really have a good pulse on the policy scene. So to sort of track specific legislative action that's happening, to follow through with really recent and nimble and current kinds of research that's happening. A lot of that work that is especially responsive to current policy climates comes from the kinds of think tanks that Michael touched on in the beginning of our conversation. Places like EPI and CAP, they tend to have really up-to-date assessments of policy actions that are under consideration. So that's a good resource for trying to sort of understand what has already been done, what questions are left to be asked, and how do we sort of understand where those gaps are that we might be able to contribute to. If we're thinking more broadly about the kind of investigative research that Michael discussed, and used the example of Rogelio and Corey's recent piece on unemployment in the pandemic among different racial and ethnic groups, that was definitely a broader piece. It wasn't specifically linked to one policy. And those kinds of questions are generated, I find, by your own expertise, your own interests, your own kind of ongoing, longer-term connections to your literature, to your field, to your interests. For example, Ellie noted that she was interested in criminal justice. Certainly, the intersections of the criminal justice system with the lives of Black and Brown people is not a new issue, although it's gotten some new attention. That's an enduring issue that there might be ways that we could investigate that in new ways with new questions and new lenses and new data, but the issue itself is not new. And so there are certainly pieces to that we can contribute, even if it's not linked to a specific policy per se. I think in terms of thinking about how we shape our research questions, one piece of advice that I wish I had when I started policy research was how important and helpful it can be to be connected to a real world context, to people who are actually doing this work on the ground. So Christina, you mentioned being connected with some nonprofit groups. I think that kind of connection can be really helpful. So you start kind of down a policy path and you get, you identify your problem and you do some research and you come up with what seems like, a great possible solution or elevation of an existing policy. But you talk to a food stamps administrator or a child care worker and they can poke a hole in it like that. They know from being on the ground, an obvious challenge to what you've proposed that's maybe harder to propose when you're on the other side of the table. And so having those connections with people who are working in the field, who are on the ground, who are in the community, I think those are really helpful for shaping what can be a practical research question and therefore a really usable piece of research on the other side. And then, as we're thinking about how to craft our questions and what questions to ask and what contributions to make, I think the other piece to think about is, well, how do we answer those questions once we have them? And I think my big piece of advice would be to think both really carefully, but also creatively about where you source data to answer those questions. So there are some data that you can almost always trust the quality of, places like the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the Census Bureau. Those sorts of resources will be useful to you if you're asking those types of questions about people and work and families. Those sorts of things are always going to be helpful. But there are also places that might be a little less traditional for sourcing data that maybe aren't in the kind of great shape that Census Bureau produced data are in, but that can still be helpful. And so that's where the creativity piece comes in, is thinking both critically and creatively about how you might draw in other data that can really make your piece of research stand out, make it different, make it especially useful in a way that existing research has not done so far. And so, data like that might come from administrative sources. So Greg, being in a school setting, it's possible that, Dairyfield collects some interesting data that would really shine a light on its practices or schools like it. That might not be data that you could source from anywhere. It might need some cleaning and some massaging to kind of clean it up and get it ready, but it could perhaps really contribute to answering questions that we haven't been able to answer before. Just some quick overall data sources I would point you to are, of course, the Census Bureau. Data.census.gov is a good one. The University of Minnesota houses a kind of harmonizing project for Census Bureau and census-like data. They do a lot of work kind of cleaning up surveys, making measures match over time, screening out, oddball cases, that sort of thing, and make the data very friendly, very user-friendly. And it's their IPUMS project, IPUMS. And then Policy Map and USA Facts are also good sources for sort of broader topical fields that the data tend to be pretty good quality for. And then my last piece of advice would be, and I think Michael highlighted this really well, is when you're thinking about your question, how you're answering it, so what is your deliverable going to be? That really is shaped by your audience. So who are you writing for, and how are they going to take in the data, the research, the analysis that you've done? I think Michael is just right about his point around kind of busy people in the policy field. Like that's perhaps one of the best framing assertions in how do you write for a policy audience, like in as few words as possible with the most important words up front, so that if you have 5 seconds of somebody's attention, you can still get your point across. And so being willing to kind of tailor what your project looks like, what your deliverable looks like, based on who's going to be using it, reading it, I think is a really important kind of piece to have in mind as you're moving through the research process.
Awesome. Thank you, both Jess and Michael. Academic research, on the other hand, is just the opposite. You want to make it as long and as boring and dreadful as possible so that those reading it. All right, let me take a break here super quick. Any questions that you kind of want to talk to Michael or Jess about related to writing policy? Any questions that just emerged from this initial conversation before we keep going? No? Okay. So I'm going to take about 10 more minutes, and I'll kind of flip to the academic side a little bit. And then we'll take a break for a little bit, and then we'll come back and finish up. So I'll run this close to 10 o'clock, and then we'll take probably a 5 or 10 minute break, just to give you guys a piece. And please jump in if you have any questions. Jess, I know you need to take off momentarily, so thank you so much for jumping on with us. For those of you in the MPP stats class, you will be seeing a lot more of Jess throughout the semester. And Jess also occasionally takes on capstone students that are kind of related to work that she does. So there's always an opportunity there. So thank you, Jess.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Dan, and congratulations to all of you. I'm excited to see you around, and even if it's just on Zoom. And please, always, you can reach out if I can be helpful with anything along your journey through CARSI. It's a great place to be, and I'm happy to meet all of you.
Cool. So, one other piece kind of related to this before we get into kind of the academic side, and Michael, your call, whether I don't know what your schedule looks like. So obviously, if you need to jump off, you need to jump off.
I have to leave in about 5 minutes to go get another COVID test.
Nice. So there's also, which is both an academic technique and a policy technique. So writing for both of them is looking at exemplary cases. And that's often used in the literature, but it's also used, to advocate for a particular policy that is either working extremely well or not working well at all. So Ellie, related to the work that you're doing, so for example, both the NYPD and the Chicago Police Department are now basically dropping lists legally. One of them was scrapes, but they're now dropping lists of every infraction that a police officer does throughout their career. So you have a list from 2010 to 2020 of every infraction of an NYP police officer. The race, the gender, the type of infraction, whether or not that infraction was actually remedied by a citizen review board, right? All in kind of this massive Excel sheet. Now, that's going to tell you something specifically about New York City. And while you can't necessarily generalize across all law enforcement, throughout the United States, we can make some strong arguments from that one case, right? One of the largest police forces, if not the largest police force in the country. How does this resonate in other places? So choosing a particular case based on, a particular variable possibly works in both of these realms of, policy and academics. So that's another way to keep in mind when there isn't that broad data set, that census data, you often can find a data set, within a particular jurisdiction that might be, a bit more rich than you would find on, on a federal level or on a state or county level. So certainly something to think about when you're looking. So the flip to academic research. And let me actually, I'll say one other thing here related to more of the MPA style of writing. Often in the MPA program, or if you're doing even program evaluation within policy, you are going to be asked to look at something very specific, right? So within the MPA program, it might be a reflection on an organizational policy, right? Different from, a program evaluation, at a broader jurisdictional level, but in principle, a very similar technique, right? You're evaluating the effectiveness of the implementation of a policy. So we'll use that technique frequently within public administration as well. So to flip briefly to academic research, like Michael said, right, is equally as much about the process as it is about whatever that outcome or finding is, right? So rarely will you lead with your finding, right? Typically, you're leading with your question, right? Your question is the most important piece of academic research. And just as Jess was giving you tools for looking for the holes in the policy research, so she said the Center for American Progress or Economic Policy Institute, that's EPI, right, Michael? If you go to those areas, you'll see what policy work has been done in those policy fields, and you'll see where there are holes. The same exact principles take place within the academic realm, right? You're looking at the literature, you're looking at journals, academic journals, to see what's missing. And ultimately, what you're crafting is an argument to demonstrate this has not been covered thus far in the academic research, and this is why this question is so important. So let me just share my screen with you quickly. And I'm going to just pull up, one tool to do that with. I want to see what I am sharing here. I don't think there's, so I'm going to jump over here. So does everyone see Google Scholar? I can't see you, so if someone could just say yes or no.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So Google Scholar is one of the easiest search engines in the world to search academic articles. And one of the coolest features of Google Scholar is if you go into settings, you could click on library links and you could add the University of New Hampshire. Right? So you would just search it here. So every time I do a Scholar search, we'll do this one. Right? So this is Mel Dubnick. He's a just recently retired faculty member. Here's an article he wrote in 1987. I said Dubnick Challenger, right? That's the article I'm looking for. Those are some keywords. Right here, I'm going to see that the university is going to have access to it, and I'm going to get a direct link to that article, which is really great to be able to have. So you're searching the entire university catalog, but you're also searching everywhere online for that academic article. Another really cool thing about Google Scholar is you could use this feature called My Library. So My Library allows you to just star things. So if I were to click on this article, it'll pull it up there. Let me go back to the Dubnik article. If I click on this star right here, it will save it to my library. If I click on these citations, say I want to find out, hey, who else has written about this or related to this? I could click on these citations. This is every article that has cited that Dubnik article. Right. The other cool thing about this, and there are a number of tools that do this, but one cool thing you could do here is you could click on that little quote, and then it's going to give it to you in APA. It's going to give it to you in every style that you might need. And you just copy it. You could export it to any of these reference areas. So RefWorks, RefMan, EndNote, etc. So really straightforward and really easy. You know, the difference between kind of doing this work and the work that Michael's talking about is this is where all of your gems are stored, right? So if I were interested in accountability, I would, see this article. I could then scroll through all of these articles. Public accountability, wow, that's been cited a lot. And then scroll through that, right? It's going to pull up the Google book. I'll see this free preview, right? The other thing I could do here, and once again, kind of much more academic-y than anything else, is say I pull up this article. Sure, I'll look at the article and I want to know what's in it. But the first thing I'll do is I'll scroll to the bottom and I'll go to the references. And this one doesn't have, here they are, right? All the notes. And I know you guys can't see that terribly well. But I'll say, okay, who did they reference? And should I be looking at these pieces too? Right? Because this is essentially a summary of the literature up to that part in time, right? So if that was written in 1987, then I know up till 1987, so long as I think, this guy Mel Dubnik was a good researcher, then I'll be able to capture all of the research up to that point. Right, so these are all kind of tricks that you could do, and they allow you to access the research in a much more efficient way than you might otherwise access the research. And Michael may disagree with me on this, and Michael's off, so that's okay. I tend to say, have the argument on the page that you want to have the argument on. If it's an environmental argument, then make an environmental argument. If it's an economic argument, then make an economic argument, right? But you need to choose, right? If you're making an environmental argument to a bunch of economists, it's not going to be overly compelling, right? Whether it's academic or not, right? I would never publish a piece on economics in a journal about criminal justice, right? I might give a snippet and I might say, you know what, this also has ramifications for the economy. Here they are, X, Y, and Z. But that's not going to be the focus of that article, right? Know what page you're having the conversation on and make your argument within that page of the book, because otherwise it's not going to resonate with the folks that you're trying to talk to, right? Knowing your audience. Let me stop there and I'll open it up to questions. This is, I will say, extremely challenging to do. And like I said at the top of this, I have one of the hardest times in the world taking an academic piece and distilling it into a policy piece, because to some degree, right, it strips everything away from what I was taught, which is research is empirical. There is no opinion, right? Obviously, I know that that's not true, right? But research is empirical, and ideally you do your best to get rid of your bias. So then, throwing bias back in and advocating for something becomes a really hard thing to do as a researcher. So making that pivot is challenging. In Jess's class, you're going to get really a great experience, and same for the MPA students in Carolyn's class, a great exposure to research and research methods. However, if you take media strategy, right, or negotiations, or any of those courses that require that you take a stance and support it, you're going to actually learn just the opposite, right? Which is not this unbiased approach, but how to support whatever position it is that you're advocating for. And it's just a really challenging pivot to make, depending how deep you go into one or the other. So let me stop there and let me just see if there are any questions kind of related to that. I'm happy to answer questions related to Google Scholar, how it works, library type research, how that works, kind of anything around those areas.
Not a question, but just experience. Personally, this is something I still struggle with today, even being in the program for first semester. It's still trying to get the hang of it, because as we all know, with social work, it's the complete opposite, in which you're trying to solve the problem at the moment. And here I feel with policy, you're looking towards the future of what you're defending. So this is definitely something that I still struggle with, and I do look forward to continue to practice this.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Monica. Anyone else? Okay. Look to the literature. One of the first things I say to my students, typically my undergrads, I'll ask a question like, are unions good, right? Do you like unions, collective bargaining, et cetera, right? And there's always a knee-jerk kind of political reaction. And, what I say to them, on day one of my class is that, political responses are unacceptable in my classes. You are welcome to have that opinion, but you need to defend that opinion with some sort of data. You need to explain to me, and that data can be anecdotal, it could be qualitative, right? It doesn't need to be hardcore research, but you need to justify your opinion with some semblance of factual information, right? And that is the basis of research. And obviously, the more in depth we get, right, the more basis and more data we're looking for to support what you're saying. If I'm going to make a general comment about the United States, well, then by all means, I'd better have data to support that general comment about the entire United States, right? It shouldn't be about some town in New Hampshire with 3,000 people, right? So that's what's important in this. And Ellie, it sounds like you might have done a little bit of legal research while you were, working. I mean, completely different beast, right? Completely different beast. And if you look at law journals, they look so different from, an environmental policy journal or an environmental science journal, which is going to look completely different from that. So it's knowing that, right? It's not assuming that you know the answer. It's simply knowing where you're going to go to look for that answer. And I really do encourage you to play with Google Scholar a good amount, because it's such an easy tool to get into journals and, get a sense of what, how they're written and why they're written. And then on the flip side, go to the Center for American Progress, right? Which is a not left-leaning, it's a left advocacy, group, but a lot of good policy research comes out of them. Look at their policy briefs and then do the same thing. Go to the American Enterprise Institute and look at some of their policy briefs and see how, the right side's doing it. And then go to Brookings, right, which tends to be more centrist, maybe less centrist, and see what they're writing, right? All of those different styles of writing will help you, with your own writing. So with that, I am going to take a break. Any questions before we take a break? And then in the second half, not even, probably about 30, 35 minutes, I've asked some faculty to jump on at the end just to introduce themselves. So I'm hoping that they're able to come on around 10:30. Why don't we take, I have 10:03 on my computer. Why don't we take till 10:10, and then we'll jump back in and we'll talk about the capstone and the Connors Writing Center, which is a resource on campus. If you folks are there, we'll get going again. So it looks like everyone is back for the most part. Here, there's just one other thing I wanted to share on the Google search options. Another really easy way to get at a lot of research is to do this. And I'm just going to share with you, this is my library again, is the phrase meta-analysis. Right? A meta-analysis is essentially a review of all of the literature. So if I wanted to do, right, so I'm writing something on organizational justice, I want to do a meta-analysis on this, I'll probably put in meta-analysis, organizational justice in quotes. And then I'm going to get this article, which, first of all, it's been cited nearly 5,000 times. But the coolest part of this is they literally review every other, could you guys still see my screen? Is it flipping?
Yes.
You see the, okay. So they literally review every article that's been done thus far. So I could read through all of that and see exactly what they've looked at. And then I'm going to get, you know, hundreds, if not thousands of citations. So it's a review of the literature in a field. And you can see basically any paper that I've ever written. So anything related to, you know, papers that I've written, any area, I always do a systematic literature review to look at what has been done comprehensively. So meta-analysis is the phrase, and you put in meta-analysis, environmental policy. You're going to see, you know, probably a couple dozen meta-analyses of these works, and it'll give you a really good framing. You know, if you get one from 2018, wonderful. It's going to give you a review of the literature up until 2018. So a good way to do it. The other thing I wanted to share was the Connors Writing Center. So that is right here. So this is a writing center that is open to grad students and undergraduate students. I strongly, strongly, strongly encourage you to take advantage of it. It is one of those resources on campus that is just great to have. And now that, you know, with all that's going on, you could just schedule an online appointment and you could have a video conference with someone to help you with your writing. It's awesome. There's no reason not to do it, right? And you're not going to send them a paper and say, hey, could you fix the grammar on this? But they're going to work with you through a paper, and they're going to make it stronger than it was prior to you submitting it. There's a video tutorial on how the video conferences work. So if you want to take a look at that, we also have something called OWL, the Online Writing Lab, which will equally accept submissions. And you could look at OWL and you could see what they do. And then the last thing, they added this new thing for graduate students. I know timing's not always great, but from Monday from 11 a.m. to 11:30, you could join a Zoom session and check in if you have weekly goals. So it's a way to hold yourself accountable. And every week they're going to check in, and it's essentially a peer accountability group. A pretty cool thing that they set up because they know, you know, we're not going to have the same opportunities to be writing in the student lounge together and be working together. So this is a way to check yourself and make sure that you're staying on task. Take advantage of these resources. They're there for you. You're paying for them, right? They're part of the fees and everything that you guys pay. If I had a free, you know, person to always send my work to, I would do it every single time. Unfortunately, I have to pay someone to do that. So take advantage of this, right? It's good stuff, you know, and they're going to help you. So that's what I would encourage you. And I guarantee you, your faculty member will say to you, if they hand you back a paper that's not up to par, they'll say, did you bring it to the writing center? And if you didn't, you know, they're going to say, bring this to the writing center. So beat them to it. Bring it to the writing center, get that paper where you want it to be before you submit it the first time. All right, I'm going to talk about capstone, and I'm going to try to do it in relatively general terms, but I want you to ask questions if you have them. The capstone process for the MPA and the MPP program are relatively similar. I'll point out the differences, but for the most part, they're similar. primarily what takes place is you put together a proposal. You submit it to, typically it's going to be me or to Carolyn. We kind of vet that proposal, we give you feedback, and then we land in a place, right, where this is your capstone. That's the basics of the process. That said, in the MPP program, there's something called the capstone planning course. It's a 1-credit course. You'll take it during your spring semester, and you'll meet with me and Michael about 4 times throughout the semester to go through that proposal writing process. For the MPA program, you're just going to get an email from me. I'm going to say, hey, who's up for their capstone next semester? And then we're going to do essentially the same thing. We're going to create a proposal together. All right, so that's kind of the process. What is a capstone project? A capstone project ranges from what I would consider an academic thesis to an extremely applied piece of work. That might be an extremely applied policy analysis. It might be an extremely applied organizational analysis. It might be helping an organization with a strategic plan, right? Or it might be writing a white paper on, an aquifer in Brazil, which we've had a student do, right? It really ranges dramatically. They provide you with a couple things. One, they provide you with a really strong writing sample that you can then share with future employers. They provide you with some applied practical experience, right? Project-based work that you could kind of put on your resume and say, look, I've done this, X, Y, and Z, right? So I've developed that skill set. They allow you to dig in deeply into an area that you want to explore. And typically the conversation, with me starts with, where do you see yourself 3 to 5 years? And where do you want further exposure? In what field you want to dig in? So in 3 to 5 years from now, you could say, okay, I am good, right? I started running in grad school and now I could take off, in whichever direction you want to go in. So they serve a number of different purposes. You are almost always connected to an external expert. In the MPA program, that often looks like an organization, right? So in the MPA program, it might be the City of Concord, or it might be, I don't know, the Committee on Aging for the endowment, right? Or something along those lines, right? There are any number of different organizations in the MPA program you connect with, and really it's focused around your interests. For the MPP program, it typically is a policy expert, right? So if you say, I want to do, legal policy, or I want to do, criminal justice policy, or I want to do environmental policy, once we kind of hone in on what the question is, the idea is that we connect you to an outside expert, assuming there's no expertise in-house. And typically we like to connect you to an outside expert. And that expert essentially says to you, nah, this has really been covered. Where you could add value is if you do, X, Y, and Z. So your CARSI advisor is always there to provide you support and guide you through the way. Your outside expert, or the organization you're working for, is really there to kind of guide you through the project content or substance itself. Sometimes these fall into what I call corner of the desk projects, where there might be an expert out there or an organization out there that just simply says, man, I wish we could have gotten this done, and we just don't have the time or capacity. And then that's when we come along and we say, hey, we have a graduate student who has been trained to do this. They could add value to you and your organization, by picking up one of these items. And typically it is a win-win situation for both that policy expert or organization and the student themselves. So those are kind of the process pieces and some of the content pieces. Ultimately, these are really independent, right? We want you guys to be experiencing this on your own with the appropriate amount of guidance. So it's not going to be a full-blown class. You will meet with your advisor or meet with your faculty member multiple times throughout the semester, but no way, in the same amount that you would meet with them typically during a class. We want you to stand on your own 2 feet. We want you to do this well and both gain the perspective of what it means to do this type of project, but also to, have those mistakes, and that's okay, right? That's part of that process. So we're here to support you, but we're not going to be holding your hands kind of throughout the capstone. The capstone typically takes place during your last semester. And it doesn't have to take place during your last semester, but typically that's the place where you are in the program where you are ready to take on one of these projects. So that said, it's good to start thinking about your capstone project your first semester. There's no reason not to start thinking about, man, what direction do I want to go in? Well, if I wrote this paper in this class, and I know I want to write about, this, in my next class. So say you're interested in philanthropy, right? And you want to start digging into philanthropy, and you want to do a project related to some philanthropic organization. Well, it makes sense to use your classes to build yourself up to that, right? So Christina, in your case, right, you want to do something on environmental policy, right? You're going to start picking up classes related to that. These classes are going to have various assignments, and slowly but steadily, you should be honing in onto a topic that you think you could really add value in and that interests you. And that's not to say this is what you're going to end up doing forever, right? But the idea is that during your graduate studies, you're going to want to be able to focus on that. The other end of the spectrum, which I didn't really talk about much, is kind of that thesis-y option, right? Which wouldn't be as applied. It would be more research-based. And typically what would happen is you'd be connected to a researcher or scholar at UNH to work on that type of project. If any students say, you know what, I'm anticipating that I want to go on and get a doctoral degree, or I want to stay within, academic research, that's typically where those students end up, going, and that's what they end up doing. And we're here to support students, in that realm too. So that's a decision that doesn't necessarily need to be made, anytime soon, but it's something to think about, that you don't need to be completely applied, completely academic. You could fall somewhere in between, and we could carve out whatever works for you. All right, so I am going to stop there, and I'm going to open it up to questions. Now, any questions related to anything we've covered today, any questions related to capstone, or just anything else that is on your mind?
And I actually have a quick question about the capstone. You're talking about for the MPA students really kind of working with outside organizations. How does it work, like linking up with them? Is it because you mentioned that, a lot of these organizations kind of have back burner projects that they come to you or Carsey with, looking for grad students who might be able to help them complete those things. Is there some kind of running list of organizations that have come to you guys, or is it really more up to us to go out and find someone to work with?
Yeah, Greg, it's a great question. It happens both ways. So more often than not, students, we have a conversation. And typically, and what I say to people who are already working is, ideally, it's not at the organization that you're working at. If it is at the organization you're working at, then ideally it's something outside of your typical responsibility. Typically what happens is students come to me with an idea, and then MPA, I'm pretty good at finding that organization, right? I've been doing it for a while now. I know most of the nonprofits across the state. And I know, city governments, et cetera. So I kind of find that project. And we frequently get requests. So we make that connection. MPP is slightly different in that my policy, connections aren't as strong as, say, Michael's. So what would typically happen is a policy student would kind of create their initial proposal. So this is the one backwards, one flip, right? For an MPA student, we talk, you meet with the organization, then you draft the proposal. For an MPP student, you're typically going to draft the proposal first. You're going to say, I really want to do something in this area. And then I'll look at it and I'll be like, okay, that seems all right. Let me send it to Michael. Michael will look at it and say, you know what, there's been loads of policy research done in that area already. Let's tweak that a little bit and let's connect them with so-and-so. So we, we kind of brainstorm in the policy area, I would say, more than we do in the administration area. The administration area, we tend to have organizations that we know right off the bat. Whereas the policy area, policy is so nuanced that there are so many different experts that it ranges. But I will say, even if we don't know an expert in an area, so for example, I had a student that wanted to do something in education policy. She wanted to be in Boston. She didn't want to be in New Hampshire. New Hampshire was kind of an easy fix for us. We have plenty of policy experts in education that we know, but in Boston, we weren't, as familiar. I picked up the phone. I called 3 or 4 different organizations. All of them were more than happy to take a student to do some real policy work for them. So even if we don't know someone, we really do take the burden on ourselves to find you that connection. And rarely are we going to leave you guys without someone to work with. The flip side is, Greg, you come to me and you say, hey, I know someone in this space. I really would love to work with this organization. And we say, great, go for it. So it goes both ways. Typically, we're finding the organization connection. And typically what I would say is, ideally, it's a connection that you want to make. And ideally, it helps build your network, and get you kind of to that next step that you want to be.
Dan, you kind of just answered this, but in terms of, the location of your research in the capstone, you generally, default to New Hampshire data, or is there ever an issue where there might be better data elsewhere, or it's a more broad, like countrywide research project for the capstone? Is there like a certain default for that?
No default. Only default for, and this is more MPA than MPP, is that it's easier to do an organizational capstone in New Hampshire simply because that's where we are. And the MPA capstone tends to be much more applied and much less policy driven. The MPP capstone, it's really based on your policy question, right? I mean, I had a student last year that was looking at a shared water source between India and Pakistan, I believe, right? I mean, and that was her focus. I had a student, the aquifer, there was a student that did a aquifer study in Brazil. So it really depends on where you want to focus your research, what lens you want to use, and what unit of analysis, right? If you're looking at a state, then I might say, great, let's do the New England states and use them as comparators. But if you're saying, I want to do something at the federal level, then by all means, that's accessible. Our connections vary for that, right? So that's typically what we're to look to first, right? Michael has loads of DC connections that kind of do a lot of federal policy. Locally, we have a lot more connections throughout New England at the state level than we do, in Arizona. But we'll figure it out. We'll make it work. Any other questions hanging out there? And not just related to capstone, kind of related to, look, we're starting classes next week. So anything related to classes starting, anything along those lines.
Yeah, actually, I have another quick question. I was on Canvas, I think yesterday, looking to see if courses had been published. It didn't look like they had been. Is there something wrong on my end, or just curious if there's any
on your end? There's no way it's your faculty. So as Greg is in one of my courses, I have not published my course yet. Okay. Yeah, my assumption is, it's going to vary. It's a heavier lift this semester because all of us are trying to create courses that are both online and in certain cases in person. So for example, I'm teaching an in-person class, but I also need to have accessible online that also needs to translate. I mean, it's just becoming a bit heavier of a lift. My typical, time frame, and faculty vary, is I'll send out an email. My class starts Monday, so I'll send out another email probably Thursday or Friday with my syllabus, and then I won't publish my class really until Monday. And and there's nothing due on Monday, until the next 2 weeks out, actually, right? Because we have Labor Day. So classes will start being published. It's probably not on your end. What I would say is, by Monday, if you don't see classes, then we'll have a problem. But we could all see our class lists in Canvas, so we'll know who's there. So we could typically make that comparison. So you should be fine. How about Ellie or Christina? Have you guys, or Aislinn, have you guys looked online yet? Do you see your classes yet?
Yeah, I see a couple. The one thing that's not working in Canvas for me is the purchase course materials link that takes you to the bookstore with Barnes and Noble. So one of my courses had a book listed, and I just didn't use that link. I just went there directly myself and found it. But I don't know if that's just, again, on my side or globally.
No, Canvas has all these different features, and faculty opt to use them or not use them. And one of them is that purchase course material feature. So, for my class, for example, I don't use that feature. Typically it's an electronic book, so I know students could just go online and rent it or grab it electronically, literally the day I assign it. So it does vary. Yeah.
Yeah, I've also had two, I think the last I checked, 2 of my courses are on Canvas, and they're all set up with the readings and things. So fine with that. I was wondering how parking is. Because I got a faculty parking application through the fellowship, but I didn't know if we're supposed to set up like a parking pass as commuter students, or just wasn't sure on that one.
Yeah, so I'll kind of hit this, and then Robin, maybe if you could hit student IDs, because I know that's been an issue. So if you have a faculty, cost is going to differ, and I don't know the difference between commuter pass and faculty pass. So I would look at cost and see. There are typically, I'm just trying to think when your classes are. The big faculty lot is called Lot B, which is, if you look on a map, you'll see it. It's kind of one of the largest parking lots on campus, and it's pretty close to most classes. Typically, after 5 o'clock, parking's open. I'm trying to think. So you have Jess's class during the day, and you'll have Bryce's class. Probably for economics, you could pull it off. But a parking pass is handy to have. There are different lots that are all designated either student, faculty, and staff around campus, and there are parking maps that could show them. Maybe we'll post one on Canvas just so you guys could see them, and we can kind of circle, where you could park. But it would be a price comparison. I mean, that's where I would land. You're probably not going to use it that much.
Ellie, I will tell you, you will absolutely want if you can get the employee faculty parking pass, that's the one you want. It's $75 for the year. A commuter pass is much more. It's also more conveniently located. If you're commuting, it's Lot A, which is past the railroad tracks. Lot B is like central to campus, Carsey. So if you can get it, absolutely opt for that. You'll be much happier with that. And it's like 24-hour parking. It's great. So if you can get it, get it.
Okay, and we can just drop that application off at the parking service or the transportation services
building. Yes.
Okay,
and that's,
cool.
You can you can drive there. It's on the other side of the tracks, Lot A. And then the parking and transportation building is just right there. It's this little low building there next to Lot A.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And student IDs, Robin, I know you're kind of getting a few different info.
Student IDs, they had originally thought they were going to move everybody sort of off-site to the parking and transportation building to pick up their student IDs, but yesterday they changed that. So the normal process is the dining and ID office, which is in the Memorial Union building, the MUB. It's second floor, and you go in and you take a right, and it's, kind of right there. So you go in there and they set you up with your ID. And I think if you want to do a finger scan, if you're doing dining and you want to be able to just use your finger, although I don't know if procedures will be different with COVID regarding finger scans. Usually they do a finger scan, so you can just go in and not have pull your ID out. So I just don't know the answer to that one, but that's where you would go and pick up your student ID.
So that is where kind of the main, not the big dining hall, which is Holloway Commons. They're connected. It is where like the salad place is, and there's basically a main kind of cafeteria type area that is not the dining hall. That's the MUB. So it is actually in the hallway that, the student center. It actually connects the MUB and Holloway Commons. It's in that hallway is where the ID, across from the post office. For Manchester students, so Greg, I don't know if this is going to apply to you, and Aislinn, if this will apply to you. If we are back on campus, your ID does allow you into the building at various points. So you could swipe an ID and have access. And you could get an ID at UNHM as well. You don't need to come to Durham to get your ID. So that's also something that you could do if you need it. At this point, you really need your student ID number. Is more important than your student ID if you're not accessing campus at this point.
Okay. Yeah. So some all online this semester. So theoretically, if things are in person in the spring, which, who knows, and personally working in a school, I think it's unlikely. I'm fine without getting a student ID until I, do end up having a class in Manchester.
Yeah. The one thing you might need it for, and this is a question that we could follow up on, is checking out library books.
Okay.
Because that is typically how they check them out. But so much is electronic once again these days that, the checking out of library books isn't necessarily happening that much. The library is open for various, times. So that would be one other piece if you ever had to do that. Trying to see who, okay, any other questions? Okay. That's good. And I think we're kind of at good timing. So, hey, Terry, we are kind of just finishing up with our questions. So Terry, we will, if you don't mind, if you wanted to just introduce yourself. We have some MPP students and MPA students. You tend to get both of them these days.
I do.
Yeah, so traditionally MPA, but you're scooping up those MPP students these days too. So I'll let Terry introduce herself. So Terry, just kind of a little bit about yourself and what you teach for us, and that'll be awesome.
Thanks, Dan. And it's good to see all of you, even though it's sort of like Hollywood Squares here. I've been teaching in the program since 2003. I retired from a 38-year career with the Attorney General's Office regulating charities. I serve on the board at the New Hampshire Center for Nonprofits and the New Hampshire Historical Society. And the two courses I teach right now are nonprofit management and negotiation skills.
Yeah, awesome. And they're very popular courses. I don't know what Terry gives them in negotiation skills, but they walk out of there and they're different people, I'll tell you that. So a lot of simulations and things like that in negotiations, right, Terry?
Right. We use a lot of the material from the Harvard program on negotiation, and it's very little lecture. You have a couple of classes where I teach you the basics, and then students jump right in. You start with very, very simple negotiations. And the last one we do is a labor contract negotiation. So it becomes more complex as time goes on. And I've had many students say to me that they've used these skills once they're in the real world. What I like about teaching is that you're permitted to make mistakes, and everybody does, and it's a safe place to learn.
Yeah, awesome. And so what we've done, Terry historically has taught in the MPA. over the last, 3 to 5 years, we're now accepting Terry's negotiations class in the communication strategy and communication track for the MPP. So that fulfills one of your track requirements should you end up taking it. It's typically taught over the summer. We obviously weren't able to do it this last summer. It is one of those courses that doesn't necessarily translate so well to an online format. So we're playing with it. We're hoping that we could get it back in, in the spring or summer of 2021. And as Terry kind of said, I mean, loads of experience, and Terry's connections to the nonprofit sector, throughout New Hampshire run pretty deep, which is nice. So, and a number of our students, I would say, I mean, you could probably think about this. You probably have better insight than I do here. A number of our students have actually leaned on Terry to start their own nonprofits. Some of them even for their capstone projects, which has been really, really cool to see. So, an excellent resource that we have, and, great classes.
And I'd be happy, Dan, to answer any questions if your students have any.
Anyone want to throw out a question? Okay.
You're probably a little bit overwhelmed right now. Well, it's very, very nice to meet all of you, and I hope I get to see you in one of the classes that I teach.
Cool. Well, thank you for dropping in, Terry. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
All right, see you. That is kind of the beauty of Zoom, is that we could have people just drop in on us. So Terry wouldn't say this. I mean, she basically ran, she ran the nonprofit sector in the state of New Hampshire for a number of years. Every nonprofit executive director had to work with her. She helps them through all of the legal challenges. So if that is an interest of yours, just this resource that we are really lucky to have. I had a few other faculty members that said they would drop in. So I'd love for them to do so. All right, any other questions before anyone else jumps in on us? No? Okay. All right, so why don't we just hang out for a few minutes? If no one comes on, it's 10:45 on my clock. If no one comes on by 10:50, we could all jump off, but I think it'll be nice for you to meet a few of the faculty. So Carolyn Arcan should be jumping on, who I think some of you had for the kind of stats prep stuff. Carolyn will be teaching your fundamentals of public policy class, and she also teaches a whole bunch of classes in the MPA, finance and management, stats, program evaluation. She's teaching a care economy course next semester, which should be pretty great because she'll kind of, she'll load in some of the COVID policy responses into that course. And then who else? Bryce is supposed to be joining us, who will be teaching economics. Paul Dan might be joining us, who's teaching organization and management. And just a reminder for all of you, you have enough electives in your programs to look across CARSI, right? There are some programs where an MPP program and an MPA program are exactly the same. Truly, there's no difference. We happen to be at pretty far extremes of the spectrum, where our MPP is super heavy policy and our MPA is much more heavy management. But the beauty is you could kind of jump in and out, right? So if there's part of you that says, you know what, I'd love to do a nonprofit advocacy group, then taking some of those MPA courses might be super helpful. And if there's some part of you in the MPA side that says, you know, I am running an organization, but it's a policy focused organization, man, learning some of those strategic communication skills in those policy classes would be super helpful as well. So don't be shy, you know, to jump into one of those classes. We like that mix between students. All right, I'm going to turn off my camera and mute myself, and if we'll just hang out for a few more minutes. If someone comes, we will all pop back on. And just like that, see, all we had to do was mute ourselves. So Carolyn is joining us. So Carolyn, we just basically finished up our orientation, and we're kind of just hanging out to meet our faculty at this point. So Terry just jumped in and jumped off, so it's great to see you. So you want to just introduce yourself, tell students what you teach and kind of your background?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. So I've met a few of you through advising thus far, but just a more formal introduction. So I teach in both the MPA and the MPP programs. I teach the fundamentals of policy analysis class for the policy students, and I teach several different classes for the MPA, including statistics, grant writing, and financial management and budgeting, among others. My background is public policy, but I'm also well-versed in public administration. I worked for several years in the nonprofit sector in financial management before going back for my PhD and joining UNH. So I do advising as well. So you'll definitely see me, or most likely see me in the classroom at some point.
Yeah, so Carolyn teaches a little bit of everything for us, and all expertly. So she's actually going to be teaching our first online stats course in the spring, which we're super excited to be able to do. I think for years, and Carolyn, maybe you could talk about this a little bit. I mean, for years, Carolyn's kind of integrated video and into her stats course, and we're finally at a place where you think you can make that transition to fully online.
Yeah. So I've been teaching it in person for, gosh, I guess this will be my 7th year. And I use Microsoft Excel, which everyone typically has on their computer already. So as I was teaching it live, I was kind of creating all sorts of additional tutorials and things that students could use to learn about the software and the concepts. And I think now we're at a place where I'll be able to successfully teach it mainly online with videos, but also I'm going to be having optional weekly drop-in sessions where I can demonstrate concepts and answer questions. So there'll be a little bit of everything, and I think it's going to work out pretty well.
Cool. And as I mentioned to you guys, Carolyn's also teaching this Care Economy course next semester, which I think will be kind of both have some PA aspects and some public policy aspects. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So it'll be relevant both to practitioners working in healthcare organizations, organizations that deal with labor policy around care work and care workers. So there'll be some policy analysis. There'll be some information that would be useful, kind of background, foundational knowledge for practitioners. And my background is interdisciplinary. So I like to bring in a little bit of economics, sociology, policy, and kind of overlay those into a course where we're exploring real stuff, real policy issues.
Cool. Well, thank you, Carolyn. I don't know if anyone has any questions for Carolyn before we let her go. All good?
I look forward to seeing a bunch of you in class.
Cool. Well, thank you for stopping by.
Yeah, see you later.
Okay. We don't need to sit around. I ask people to come on between 10:30 and 11. So if they show up at 10:55, they're lost. You will meet them all. Your faculty truly are great. And I would just say we're very serious, when it comes to hiring the right type of faculty. And what that means from my perspective is, yes, some of them do have that academic experience, but more than anything, they all have applied experience, real world policy and administrative experience. And through the years, they've kind of honed the craft of teaching that experience. More so, I would say, both programs, to be honest. I was going to say more so in the policy program, but the truth is the MPA program has some pretty fierce, professionals as well in their own right. Much more, I would say the MPA faculty are much more local, doing work in both Concord and at the state level. The MPP faculty certainly have much more of a federal perspective, I would say. in that they're based out of DC, but they do loads of state policy work. But they kind of started their careers in DC. And then I don't want to leave off the MCD faculty, the community development faculty, which is broadly international. I mean, really coming from all over. And we're just super lucky with the faculty that we have. I can't wait for you all to meet them and to take our courses. And with that, I will leave it there. If there are any other questions, please just reach out. Same thing, Robin, Sanjeev, myself, we're always here for you guys and happy to help out whenever we can. So we will see you all later. Good luck with the start of the semester. Reach out if you need anything. And we're super excited. We can't wait to get this moving.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you guys. See you.